July 28th, about 10 p.m. I just got my youngest son to bed, and I found myself in that zone where I had been exhausted and I was dozing off, but suddenly I was super restless and energized. So I'm standing in my kitchen, sort of half scrolling through TikTok while drinking some hot tea, when this froze me mid-sip.
Oh, you didn't know that octopuses edit their RNA at an alarming rate compared to like most other animals that we know of, and they're doing it in response to temperature change?
My attention was had. I mean, octopuses and RNA editing? Like, that's two of my favorite things to learn and talk about. Before I had even lowered the mug from my lips, I had hit the follow button and began writing a DM for an interview request. And they said yes.
Hi, my name is Mindlin. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a graduate student at Walla Walla University, and I study octopuses and their RNA editing.
Within a week, we were sitting down for a conversation I think will go into the books as one of the best in this show's history. I'm Devin Boker. This is The Wildlife. And on today's episode, social media, SciComm, and all things cephalopod, their super cool brains, their mind-blowing camouflage RNA editing, peculiar romances, the underappreciated living fossils, and why octopuses are most definitely not aliens. But before we get to any of that, let's get to know Meg.
I was always interested in animals. I was definitely like an animal kid growing up. I like had all the little bug kits, and I would like go and collect bugs from the creek, and I'd spend all my time in like I grew up in Missouri, so I had lakes and rivers. So I spent all my time at lakes and rivers, like looking for crawfish and like catching little fish and little frogs and like all sorts of anything I could get my hands on, basically.
Hearing that, you might wonder, was marine biology always the plan?
It was for marine biology, but I didn't take, like, the science path until, like, literally I was applying to colleges. Like, everybody thought I was gonna grow up to be an artist, and I was gonna go to art school and become a famous painter or something, and then I got really burnt out on art because of AP Studio Art in high school, um, and I was like, "You know what I love the ocean. So let's just go and do marine biology and see where that goes." And then I got to my undergrad. My major was marine biology, and then I took my like intro to molecular biology course, and I was like, hold up. I was like, this is the coolest thing. I had always really loved genetics. But I just for some reason like everything clicked in that class, and all of a sudden molecular biology made sense to me. And I could not stop talking about it. So I switched majors. I got myself into an RNA research lab, and I just like committed to like molecular biology, and honestly, it was great. I loved it. I had so much fun.
That is really cool.
Mhm.
I during like the academic year, I'm a high school science teacher.
Oh,
So,
that's so
um,
cool.
yeah, one of my favorite units when we get to it is like talking like transcription and translation and stuff, and
Hmm.
getting into RNA and everything. And I wish that more students were as excited about it as I get and stuff. Some of
I
them are just
feel
like,
like
okay.
they just like I got so hyped about it because of RNA editing and octopuses. I feel like I
Hmm.
don't know. For me, it's like was the small little details that got me excited about molecular biology, and like how
Yeah.
all these little things came together and then made like
Hmm.
all the genetic diversity in the world. And it was all because of
Yeah.
one little protein or like one little thing. Like it's just such small things that make me so excited about it.
Yeah. Well, and context can be so important too.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, maybe that's my approach this year is maybe we frame it through octopus or something like that.
That would be
You
dope.
know,
I think
that could be
I
cool.
I feel like people don't get excited about molecular biology until I start talking to them in the context of like cephalopods. And then they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh." And I'm like,
Oh,
"Yeah."
this is actually pretty cool. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
because humans are boring. We like know we are human. We understand us, our experience as humans. I think humans are boring. I would much rather study something that's completely different from me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so getting to where that path is a path that can be really difficult
Hmm.
for a lot of reasons, a lot of people. What was your experience like? Do you have advice for others in terms of making it through college, getting into a grad program,
I,
especially in the sciences?
I think it really is just find something that like ignites your like curiosity and like your love of like being alive in life. Like what makes you really excited about being on this planet? And like just follow that and follow those questions and like keep asking questions even if like they're stupid questions or you think that it's like an obvious question. Sometimes it is like the best question and like the most perfect question that nobody has asked yet. And you're like, wow, that's a great question. And you're thinking of it like, oh, wow, this is obvious. Like, how would you not know to ask this question? But science is always new and exciting and coming up with new ideas and new discoveries. And that only happens if you have the courage to ask all the dumb questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's well said. On the on that spirit of maybe a dumb question, do you so looking at your content and things on social media and stuff, do you
Mhm.
consider yourself like a science communicator?
I guess I do now. It was like something that kind of came up as like I was in a job post grad that I wasn't very excited about, and I just wanted to talk about cephalopods. I was like, I don't care about what I'm doing. I just want to talk about cephalopods. So that's why I started making TikToks because I also had way more free time than I expected. And then I just yeah, and then I it kind of took off. And I mean, science communication was always something that was in the back of my mind because I had loved ologies, I loved, Crocodile Hunter, I loved the Kratz brothers growing up. Like I have been surrounded by science communication like my whole life. Like Hank Green, like oh my God. And so when there's really great science communication that I see, I get so excited about it. Um, so I think it's like a happy little way that I found myself into it. Like kind of had wanted to like see what's up with it, but just kind of ended up with it because I was bored and wanted to talk about cephalopods more.
Hey, sometimes free time is like the best thing
Yeah.
for us when it comes to like unleashing creativity,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
you have such a good range of things too, in terms of like science communication in general, because you've got some things that are like, here's some basic facts,
Hmm.
and then you've got some that are like, where it's like the text approach, where it's
Hmm.
like kind of short and quick and easily digestible, and then you've got ones where you're breaking down research papers, which is
Yeah.
something that a lot of science communicators, I feel like they stray away from. They're just like animal facts, and then, oh, I don't want to have to read that, and
See, I
you know
think breaking down the papers is the thing that I like to do most, but, they never did well. Like, so I would, like, make them, and I'd be all proud of it, and then it would get, like, 300 views, and, like, nobody would see it, but then I'd make a dumb wall of text that I made in 3 minutes that was just random info from my brain, and it gets, like, 200,000 views, and so that's the only reason I still make those is because they just do so well. Um
I feel that more. Yeah, I feel that absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the RNA editing one I made was the first one that actually, like, kinda popped off, and I was like, "Wow, I've been trying to make an RNA editing video, like, 10 times now, and it's never done this well."
Yeah, yeah. I've kind of given up on understanding the algorithms and
Oh, it's
things.
so hard. I mean, I kinda understand why the wall of text do well because it's, like, 5 seconds, and then they have to read it, and so then it loops, and then that,
So then
like
it just keeps going. Yep,
yeah,
yep.
yeah,
It's
but I
a good trick.
it is a good
Yeah.
trick, it is a good trick, but people get so mad at me because they're like, "This is a run-on sentences, I can't understand what
Oh
it's saying,"
God.
and I'm like, "But that's the point, because then you read it more."
Right. And honestly, read it out loud. Like sometimes I don't know. It's like I've done that too, where I'm like typing it and I'm like typing it the way that I would be saying it out loud if I was talking to
Same.
somebody and being conversational and just excited,
Yeah,
And then I
yeah.
look at it after and I'm like, wow. Huh. Okay.
I'm
Well,
like,
that's
"In
fine.
my head, this made sense."
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
like, next day, maybe it doesn't make the most sense, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's so many mistakes on my TikTok, like, people get mad at me, and I'm like, "This is a learning experience, guys, I don't know what to tell you."
Hey, that's honestly, I've seen that be an effective
Yeah,
intentional tool that people have used sometimes too, where they'll like do a typo and then it gets enough people commenting like, you spelled that wrong, because everyone
yeah.
wants to be right.
Yes,
You spelled that
exactly.
wrong. And all of
That's
a sudden they've
why
got like crazy engagement.
Oh yeah, that's why
Yeah.
I used to like do like, oh, like octopuses aren't the best cephalopod species, and then everybody would get so mad at me, and they'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And I'd be like, "Ha ha ha, guys."
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the octopuses, like cephalopods in general, though, was that because you mentioned the RNA
Mhm.
context? Was your work and experience and interest with cephalopods predating the RNA stuff, or was it
Yeah,
after the fact?
it actually was. So like the cephalopod stuff was like my main like interest in like the ocean. Like it started off at sharks and then I saw like some YouTube videos in the early 2000s of cephalopods and like it was all downhill from there. Um and then the RNA stuff, it just my first year of undergrad, I had to write a research paper and I wrote it about how climate change will affect the octopus. And that's when I found the RNA editing paper that had just come out, like in 2017, when I wrote the research paper. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, this is probably the coolest thing I've ever read. I read a lot of other really cool things in octopuses too that like sparked my interest. But the RNA thing, I was like, this is bonkers. Like, I need to know more about this. And I just got lucky that my undergrad, UCSC, is like the leader in RNA research in the world. And that's why I joined an RNA lab because I was like, RNA, okay, let's do this. Like, I need to know everything about RNA. Yeah, so I just got lucky.
I'm realizing we've mentioned the RNA thing like 5 or 6 times, probably,
I
but haven't
know.
exactly explained that.
You
And
know, we
that's
should explain
that's
it.
fine. We'll come back to it and explain it. I guess first, because we've mentioned octopus several times,
Mhm.
it's a point that people always want to know, and people are always wanting to like jump on about. When
Mhm.
it comes to the plural of octopus, what's the correct
Well, it's not
pluralization?
octopi. I hate to break everybody's heart. It's not octopi. And it's not octopi because it's not Latin. And so it is Greek. So therefore you would use octopodes. But the word octopus was invented by European scientists far after ancient Greece. So then kind of like all rules go out because it's not actually Greek. So you can use whatever the heck you want. And most scientists use octopuses. I don't think I've encountered one that has used octopodes or octopi, but it is octopuses. Everybody really loves to comment octopi on my videos though, and I am like, I'm tired of explaining this.
It's similar with platypuses. Because I remember at
Mm,
one point going, is it platypi or platypuses? Actually, it might have been, I was talking to it was on a different podcast episode.
mhm.
Um, and then that's when I learned what platypus really means.
What does
And
platypus really mean?
it means, hold on now, I'm trying to remember what it means. It's something like, oh, shoot, what does it
So
mean? It's like
I
a
actually
family
did
of
end up
monsters.
making a TikTok about this because it makes me so mad, like completely irrationally, unnecessarily mad, but it does. And so rather than giving it more energy to explain here, I'm just going to allow past me to explain it.
Platypuses are great, but their name is stupid. Like, have you ever stopped to wonder why platypus? Why is their common name platypus? I'll tell you why. George Shaw. In 1799, George Shaw was the first person to give a white people description of the platypus. But do you know what platypus means? Flat foot. Like, out of all of the possible things you could have named a platypus for, you picked flat foot. Now, granted, the species part of the name was anatinus, meaning duck-like. So it was flat-foot, duck-like, but still. And then it was more trouble because he couldn't use platypus, because platypus, turns out, was the genus name for a very specific kind of wood-boring beetle. So they had to change the scientific name, but platypus stuck as the common name. So now we have this ancient monotreme, which is a mammal that lays eggs, with a venomous spur, with electroreception, all of these cool friggin' traits, and it's named for having flat feet. You're probably thinking, well, maybe the new scientific name, like maybe that's better. Maybe it's more descriptive. No, Ornithorhynchus anatinus. You want to know what that means? Bird nose, duck like. Bird nose, duck like. You've got an egg laying beaver, duck creature, ancient egg laying mammal. It sweats out milk. Well, it doesn't sweat out milk, but that's just how it releases its milk. It's almost like sweat. Like all of those really cool things. And he got flat foot and bird like, duck like. What? What?
Honestly, that is kind of upsetting. I just think humans really want the pie ending. I feel like somehow that like satisfies a little, it makes our brain go rrr, you know? They're just like, ah, yes, this is satisfying. But no, it's
Yeah, I think it's shorter. It's
mm,
I think it feels cuter
I
or
think so
something. I don't
too. I
know.
think so too. But
But
like octopodes, but that's a mouthful. That's a whole mouthful. I would not want to say octopodes all the time.
no.
No.
No. No, that's not. No. Um so octopus versus squid, not like fighting, but like
Yeah,
in comparison to each other. What
comparison.
are the main like differences?
So the main differences is that octopuses have 8 arms and they don't have any tentacles. So squid, on the other hand, have 8 arms, but they have 2 tentacles. And it's the same with cuttlefish. They also have 8 arms and 2 tentacles. And there's like some other little differences. Like octopus have like no internal hard structures whatsoever, so they've completely lost their shell. Cuttlefish still have remnants of their shell, which is the cuttle bone, and then squid have their statolith or their squid pen, which is like an argonite structure. And octopuses also have a statolith, and so do cuttlefish, but octopus statolith is a lot smaller, hard to find, not as well developed. So that's kind of like the main differences between squid, cuttlefish, and octopus.
Is it true that like each octopus arm has like its own brain kind of thing?
Yeah, sort of. So I this is like this is an attend of a argument I think between me and my PI Kurt on thing. Because I think it's kind of my pet peeve when people say that an octopus has a brain in each arm. Because I get people that then come to me that are like, "Oh, well, did you get to see the," like they think it's like an actual little brain in each arm. Like they
Oh,
take it literally.
like a little of this size thing like in the arm.
Yeah, they take it
Oh
literally,
gosh.
and then they like are asking all these questions that like are based around that idea, and I'm like, no, that
Mm-hmm.
is not the right idea. So essentially, they have ganglion in each of their arms, which
Mm-hmm.
are like a cluster of nerve cells. And in a way, you can say that they are a brain because they're working without sending main signals back to their main brain. So they can like
Sure.
work
Okay.
independently. And like if you
Oh,
cut an
okay.
octopus arm off, it will like still go and hunt food and then travel the food down back to its beak as if it still had a beak.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
That's
like in a
cool.
way it kind of is like it has a brain, but in
Mm-hmm.
reality it is just like a brain is the closest word that we could use to describe what this is. But
Yeah,
it
because in general, isn't the concept of a brain really it's just like a super dense cluster of neural cells,
Yeah,
right?
and
So
it
it's just
also tends to be like that then like receives all the signals back from the body.
yeah.
And
Okay.
octopuses don't have that. They have a decentralized nervous system. So they have like a main brain in between their eyes, but 2/3 of their neurons are spread out between their arms. So their arms can act independently from each other. They can like do all their own things. They can go off, one arm can go off and search for food, one arm can break open a clam. Like, they are independent. They can still exert like top down control, but like really the point I try to stress is that their nervous system and their brain is like so different from any other brain that we know of that it isn't really even a brain that fits our definition of a brain. Which I think is the more interesting fact, but science communicators think that's a little bit too complicated for kids. But I feel like if you tell them
No.
it's not even a brain, they would be like, "What?" They'd be like,
Yeah, yeah.
"That doesn't even fit our definition of brain." Like they would remember that.
It sounds like I don't know, maybe I don't want to like convolute it too much, but it
Yeah,
sounds like a big step up from like the neural net of a jellyfish. I mean a big step up
yeah,
from that where it's like a kind of widely distributed
yeah, sort
network.
of. I mean, I don't. To be fair, my knowledge of jellyfish limited, but like kind of. It's just that like most of their neurons are distributed in their arms, and so they get to do a lot of things done that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. I mean, if you've got eight that are kind of out
Yeah.
exploring the environment kind of
Mhm.
independently and stuff.
And
You
they
can
have
receive a lot of data like that, I
Oh
guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they have taste receptors on each individual sucker, so it's like if your arms was covered in tongues.
Oh,
And
weird.
they can move each sucker independently. Like they have a lot of control over their arms, and it really is like in a way like they have their own brain,
Yeah.
but it's also not. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's fascinating. I prefer that definition. I see what you're saying though. Like
I
I
also
prefer like to think of it
prefer
like
it.
as it's just cooler. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
I know, and I
yeah.
just feel like saying that you have a brain in each arm just leads to more confusion than then you're just going down a wrong path. Or at least that's what I see with people on TikTok and when I talk to classrooms and things like that. They always end up at the wrong idea.
Yeah, it's kind of the wrong point of like
Yeah.
what makes it so unique and interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think it really, like, loses its, like, complexity and novelty when you say it that way because it's just, like it's literally not like anything else we know. Like, they evolved their nervous system entirely independently from us. So it's not the same, it's different. It's, like, wholeheartedly different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. In terms of okay, so like how many species are there of octopus?
So there's about 300 species of octopuses,
Hmm.
about 300 of squid, and about 100 of cuttlefish.
Oh,
And
okay.
then, like,
Okay.
6 of Nautilus, there used to be only 3, but now they just discovered 3 more, so there's, like, about 6 of Nautilus.
It's kind of like a weak point for me for sure when it comes to like zoology and stuff. Like I love the idea of cephalopods and stuff, but then when it gets to like specifics, I'm like, oh, I don't actually know. That's interesting. Like, I can name, like there's the Pacific one, and
Yeah.
then there's like the blue ring octopus that everyone likes to talk about. Humboldt squids, I think, are really cool, and vampire squids,
Mhm.
and stuff. But then, yeah, 300, like, holy smokes, that's a lot more than I thought.
There's so many. I don't even know. I could maybe name like 10 octopuses. Like I don't even know
Hmm.
them all. Like, and I think a lot of times, especially as we're doing more like molecular analysis of like their genomes and things, like we're just getting a different idea of what type
Hmm.
of species. So it's just ever changing and ever growing. Um, but yeah, there's still a lot. There's a surprising amount of them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you have a favorite?
I'm really bad at picking favorites. So I have like 3. I like my favorites are Magna pinna, which is the big fin squid, or like what we like to call the elbow squid. That's like the really deep sea elusive squid that like has its arms like this
Oh
and it's
yeah.
creepy. Yeah.
I can almost guarantee you that you have seen some kind of video somewhere on social media about the Magna Pinna. It's that one that usually the footage is some kind of like really really dark and like the green tinted, almost like it's night vision, something like that. And it looks like if you took a stingray and then you made it pointing upward, and then down from the stinger you had these two I don't even know, like things that extended out to the sides and in both directions, and then from there there's tentacles hanging. That's probably the worst description of a magna pinna that has ever been vocalized, but you know what, we're just gonna go with it. And if you don't know, then you could, I guess, look it up, or I'll put a video in the episode notes. There you go. It's the one that like is the stuff of nightmares, at least in those video clips. It looks like their tentacles extend for eons, and that's a measure of time, not distance. But George Lucas could do it, and so can I.
So Magna pinna is one of my favorites, and then the vampire squid, which is not a squid, but it's also not an octopus. It's its own thing entirely. And yeah, and there's a lot of thought of over whether vampire squid is like the ancestral species to octopuses and squid and cuttlefish, which is
Oh,
also very cool. And then the third is probably like the Dumbo or the flapjack octopus. Like
oh yeah.
I love deep sea octopuses. Like they are my favorite. Yeah.
The Dumbo octopus is definitely another one that you've seen. They're the ones like, oh, in Finding Nemo, the one, oh, you guys made me ink. I'm 99% sure that is a Dumbo. Seeing those anytime they pop up on like the Nautilus live streams, and then the whole crew is all like, "Oh,"
Yes,
it's
I
wholesome. I
love the
love it.
Nautilus live streams. I love seeing scientists get so hyped over the animals that they see. Oh my god. Like, I would be the same way. Yeah, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, I like to turn them on sometimes, like when I'm teaching and everyone's kind of doing independent work. I'll just turn them on in the background, but then I end up having to like either I go on tangents or I have to turn them off because everyone's like, just staring.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah.
that's awesome. We also got to get our work done. But look at these. Look at the hagfish on there. That's
Oh
crazy.
my god. I would probably like a better one because I would also lose my mind and not be able to concentrate on anything else. Like the Monterey Bay live feeds. Those are so
Yeah.
good. Mhm.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, sometimes they're not quite in there and stuff, so then you kind of have to search
Mm,
for things. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so speaking of like the neural stuff with Octopus and everything, I saw you had a video talking about the brain activity in the free moving octopus, and you were very very excited about that whole topic. And I was just wondering, could you give like a synopsis like you did in your video?
Yeah, so essentially, they did the very first study of brain activity in a free moving, untethered octopus, which people don't realize how hard. I mean, it seems like easy once you figure out how they did it, but there's not a lot of us, so it took a while. Essentially, like you can't put any monitors on an octopus because they will take it off. And so when they were originally trying to do brain scans of a free moving untethered octopus, they put all the little clips on and then the octopus would just throw them off. And you can't really put them in an MRI machine because, you know, first of all, they're out of water, which isn't like most exciting for an octopus. You can't put an aquarium in like a tank in an MRI machine. Like it's just not an ideal environment. And so what they eventually ended up doing was like surgically attaching a little neurotransmitter or a little like probe on top of their like right under their mantle, right on top of their brain, and then like had a bunch of little electrodes putting into like different parts of their brain, especially for like learning and memory, those parts of the brain, and then recorded it for like 12 hours of just what the octopus was doing. They had a video accompaniment as well. And they only got 12 hours of recording because that was as long as the probe could record. But they got some interesting things. They got a lot of wavelengths that are like very similar to what we see in other animals, like very on track. But they got one frequency that they had never seen recorded in any other animal, which is wild. It was like a repeating like a boop boop. I think at least it was like a boop boop and then a pause and then a boop boop and then a pause, something like that. It was like 2 hertz, but they've never seen it in any other animal, and they don't know what it
Huh.
is. And they're like, they are obviously going to do more studies. This was just kind of like the preliminary. Oh my god, we did it! Now we can do this, and now we're going to do other things. But they don't know. They don't know what it means. They don't know what it's for. But it is very intriguing.
That is intriguing. See, this is what I love about science stuff is like there's never an end, there's
No, they
always something
never
new.
end. People
It's the
always are
best.
like, "Well, what does this study mean? What is the grant? What is it?" And I'm like, "Guys, this is just the tiny little piece." And then they're gonna go on and they're gonna do this more. But like the big grand
Hmm.
scheme, no, we don't know. We don't know. We just
Yeah.
know we just found this thing. It's cool. Now we have to go do more research and figure out. But for
I
this paper, that's our main discovery.
it's also it's the humans have a very very limited view of like what is intelligence,
Yeah.
what and it's kind of, it feels like in recent years in particular that definition's kind of expanding a little bit, and we're starting to say, well, okay, human intelligence is just one form of intelligence and there's actually many forms, and it doesn't necessarily have to mirror human, and so like I feel like when you kind of break that wall away, you can look at wildlife and their biology in a completely new light, which is pretty cool. Like I don't know, I'm curious. I'm curious what the future road looks like.
I mean, So I think the thing when we are talking about intelligence in other animals is that we love to compare it back to us because we are the ultimate like organism. We are the most intelligent being. But really that's just like our perspective. And it's not necessarily accounting for the organism and its environment and how well adapted it is to its environment. And so when we're talking about intelligence, you really want to get into what you call the umwelt, which the umwelt is the organism's environment and how they perceive it. And so when you're talking then about like, and I mean, there's this really good book called Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? Which is fantastic and talks more about it than I think I'm able to talk more about intelligence in animals. But I think we really, especially when it comes to octopuses, you have to get rid of sort of the vertebrate mentality, especially when it comes to when we're doing these other things like we did the sleep study recently where we recorded an octopus supposedly in sleep state and supposedly dreaming. The thing is then though is we're taking all of this data and then directly correlating it to our experience when in reality this is an entirely new species developed entirely different from us. So there's not really a way that we can say that it is the same to us. It could be completely different and we're just, filling in the notches and being like, "Oh, we do this. That must be the same thing." But it could not be the same thing. It could totally not be the same thing. And if we continue to like anthropomorphize them in that sense, like humanize them, then we're kind of missing out on like the novelty of what it is they got going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think it actually it might have been an ologies episode or something recently, but
Mhm.
it's a similar topic, but with like grief. People
Yeah.
talking about animal grief and those animals don't grieve. Okay, well, are we looking at it the way that humans grieve?
Mhm.
And then sometimes you project and you go, oh, that animal is grieving. Well, because it looks
Yeah.
like something humans might do. So yeah, it gets messy really, really quick when you just want to
Mhm.
like project like that. And so
Yeah, and
I don't know.
especially
Yeah.
with like octopuses because people are like, "Oh, they're so similar to us. They're so intelligent. Look at the curiosity." And it's like, yeah, yeah, you can see similarities. Like it is freaky, but like that's not us. It's different. It's which I think is then which I think is like the coolest thing about it is that it's so entirely different, but you kind of ended up at sort of the same end game. But we have to kind of get rid of the human biases so we can just see like how different it is.
So that's actually a good segue. Human biases of things. The Nautilus. The
No.
Nautilus. You had a good segment on justice for the Nautilus.
Yeah, I love nautiluses. They're one of my favorite animals. I just think they're so freaky and cool. And people always think that they are stupid and that they're brain dead and they got nothing going on behind those eyes. Because literally you watch them and they're just kind of like floating and they just kind of drift through open ocean and they're kind of, they don't do much. I don't blame them. But they're not stupid. They have a very simple brain, but they can do a lot of cognitive tasks that you would not expect them to do. And I just think that they deserve recognition for
Yeah,
not being completely brain dead. Like they perform pretty well, especially for having such a simple brain.
I agree. And they're very Pokemon esque, which
Oh,
is
they're so
obvious because I
Pokemon.
mean, like every
Oh my
Pokemon is
god.
inspired by like real animals and stuff. But
Oh yeah.
you know,
I mean, if there was
they're
a
just so
Nautilus
cool.
Pokemon, they're just so cool and they're so weird and they're so freaky and like the fact that we're still discovering new species of them is wild. And the fact that we thought that they were completely extinct up until like not that long ago and then all of a sudden someone found one and they're like, "No way." And then they went back and they're like, "Oh my god, that is a nautilus." Like I think it's great. And they really are like we call them like living fossils, but like living nautiluses aren't really like all that old. They're only like 3 million years old. They still look the
Hmm.
same, but like completely different species from like way back when. But it just like it brings a little bit of the like old school ocean back into like real world ocean and I just appreciate it.
Absolutely. There's a lot of examples of creatures like that. Well, maybe horseshoe crabs aren't the best example because they've also been around for a really long time, but
Yeah,
like
but they're so
kind of a
freaky and
similar.
so cool.
Yeah.
I love freaky ocean animals. Like I would
Yeah.
give anything to be in the Cambrian explosion and just see the wildness that animals got up to. Like, oh my God, they just tried out everything. They just tried it
I
all
know,
out, and
right?
some of it,
Yeah.
a lot of it didn't, but I love them all for it.
You look at some of the like the artistic representation sometimes and you're like, no, you made that up. Like there's no way.
Well,
And then you look and you're
even
like, oh,
ancient
okay.
cephalopods, like Precambrian cephalopods, like there's literally one that looks like a safety pin. Like, why are you thinking that? What benefit does that have to you? But like Slay, you're killing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Animals are weird and I
Animals
love
are
them
so
for that.
weird.
That's
I do
great.
too.
So I guess now we should finally address the thing that we've mentioned and then did not elaborate on, which is such a tease for people to listen. The RNA editing
RNA
and the
editing.
new RNA editing study.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, I could talk all day about RNA editing. So RNA editing, it's a post-transcriptional process. So it just happens after DNA replication, but before the code gets translated into a protein. And so essentially, we do RNA editing. Other animals do RNA editing. The difference is, though, that we and other animals are doing RNA editing in the untranslated regions of our genome, so the sections that don't get made into proteins. So generally, nothing ever happens. I know now that like those untranslated regions, which are also called UTRs, are being more researched, and there is actually some cool things that happen with them. That is outside my knowledge, but for the most part, nothing ever happens. In cephalopods, however, the edits are being made in the translated regions of the genome. So edits are actually being made into proteins. And they do this at a magnitude far greater than any other species we know. Like nobody, we don't know any other species that does RNA editing like this. And not only do they do it so much, but they also have conserved editing sites that are passed down. So it's freaky, and there's kind of like this, what is the give and take of doing RNA editing versus like conventional DNA evolution, which is where you have, random mutation in your DNA that then gets passed down through reproduction and as like the species goes on. And so like there is some give and take, like, their evolution is maybe slowed down a little bit because they're not making things into their DNA, so their traits aren't getting passed down. Even though some are getting conserved, some edits are getting conserved. I don't know how the edits get conserved. I don't know if we know that or not. They discovered it randomly, like they didn't mean to find it, which is all the best science, is when you don't at all mean to find it. They basically got an octopus from the Arctic and then one from the tropics, and they sequenced their DNA and then wanted to compare them. And what they found was that their DNA sequences were pretty much the same, which was not at all what they were expecting, because they're two octopuses in two completely different regions of the world. They expect for them to be two different species with different DNA separated. But they didn't find that. They found pretty much the same thing. And then when they looked further, they found that almost all of the differences were in their RNA. And so then that started a crazy rabbit hole of, oh my God, what are these cephalopods doing with their RNA?
Well, it's just fascinating because like normally the way that it's taught
Mm-hmm.
or thought about is it's like, so you got your DNA, it's your destiny essentially, kind of. I mean, there's you throw in epigenetics and stuff like that, and it gets very
Yeah.
complicated very quickly.
Yes, it does get
But
very
you've got your code, and
Yeah.
it gets transcribed, and then that transcription gets translated, and then you've got your protein, and that's about it. It's whatever the DNA says, and there's no interruption from there
That's
on.
how it goes.
But in cephalopods, you've got the DNA, but then the RNA just does like it kind of just does its own thing, so to speak. Like it makes its own edits and things, which is
Yeah,
that's insane.
it is insane. It's so wild. It's so completely wild. It's done by this thing called ADAR. So it's adenosine demases acting on RNA. And so what they're basically doing is they're going to convert your A nucleotide to an I nucleotide. And then an I nucleotide is read as a G nucleotide. And so then that makes a whole lot of crazy
That's just
cascading
crazy.
effects, because just changing one nucleotide can like encode for a whole different protein.
Right. So, do they know yet exactly like what leads to that pressure? Like what cause is it
So we
environmental conditions
definitely
and
we
things that
definitely know right now that temperature will trigger editing. That's like as much as we know. That's kind of all that we are currently studying. I'm studying whether or not ocean acidification will trigger editing. It does trigger editing, but I currently don't know. Well, I know that they're editing zinc fingers, which zinc fingers are like little protein regulators that are attached to the DNA, and then like they're regulating like another protein and either like making more of that protein or making less of that protein. So now I'm trying to figure out what heckin' protein they're making more or less of. But that's kind of the scope of it. All the RNA studies have been done through temperature. So we know temperature triggers it. There probably is more things that trigger it, like ocean acidification probably does trigger it. What it triggers, don't know yet. But that's, yeah, that like people ask me so many questions and I'm like, this is it, guys. Like this is why I'm trying to get you excited about this, so you all will join me and become
yeah.
scientists and make more research so we can find more things out about this.
I cannot wait to share this with my students in the fall
Oh,
because it's just
cool.
fascinating.
It's just so
That is
cool.
and
And
so I see what you're saying because you mentioned how like it might have it's maybe slowed down their evolution a bit because the DNA itself isn't changing all that
yeah.
much. But that's just so interesting that it's like in the individual's lifespan,
Mhm.
because that's the other piece. We normally there's no changes in the lifespan. There's no changes in
Yeah.
the lifespan. It's all generation to generation.
Yeah.
But in cephalopods,
It's changing in the
we're saying no, it's changing
lifespan.
lifespan.
And
That's
then, like,
so
the
cool.
wildest thing about it is because there's, pros and cons. Like, con, they're slowing down their evolution. They're like normal, conventional evolution. Pro, they can have multiple versions of the same protein and they keep them all. So depending on the environment, they've already made that edit. Suppose like this is the
Gosh,
thinking, and then they can like choose which edited protein is best for their current situation.
it's like wide ranging adaptability in their lifespan,
Yeah,
I suppose, which is
yeah.
that's just
And then
cool.
it's like, then you get all the big pictures because like cephalopods have survived 5 mass extinctions. They've never died out. They're older than trees, they're older than sharks. Like they've been around for a while and they've never died out. So like is this possibly did they take this little tool that nobody else was using, expand upon it, and like that was the whole reason for their success? Like how have cephalopods got here? How have they survived? How are they the way they are? And then it's like, well, probably RNA editing played a big role in that.
There's a couple things that are like popping up in my mind, and
Yeah,
number one, I guess, is just that's it's probably the coolest thing in biology that I've ever heard about, which
I
is
think so
this.
too. I think so
I
too.
I could also see people knowing the internet. I could also see people go, see, they're aliens. Like, see, they're different from anything else that exists, and therefore, and it's like, well, no, that's not.
Okay,
But I could totally see it.
that's my I like okay. I will I'm a sci-fi lover. I'm an alien fiend. Give me all the science fiction you can possibly give me. Octopuses are not aliens. And honestly, I think that makes it cooler. And the reason that we know they are not aliens is because we can trace them back in our lineage. We have a common ancestor with octopuses. They come from snails. Like, they are in our history. They are made of the same materials that we are all made of. They are born on planet Earth. But they are kind of the closest thing that we have to what life would look like on a different planet. And I say that sparingly because I hate mentioning it. And then people are like, they're aliens. But, like, if you think about it, they have evolved a completely different way of getting similar traits to us. But they're doing it in a totally, they have the same materials, same proteins, same cells, everything. And they've just used them all differently, and ended up at the exact same place, which, maybe that's probably like what other life is going to look like, because we can see on other planets that, Earth is perfectly suited for life, for creating life. We got our oceans, we got our oxygen, we have all the things that make life. But life isn't always going to evolve exactly the same way. It's a big give and take. It's a big, here's the materials, see what works. And octopuses did it in a completely different way. And so, yeah, in that sense, they are kind of the closest thing we have to aliens. But they're not aliens.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I've even had students who have been like, I've seen Doctor Who, and
Ugh.
I've seen the Daleks, and they look like, squid or something, and
But
I bet
that's
they
because
are.
all of media has taken cephalopods as their inspiration for creating aliens. Which, like, I can't blame them. They're freaky. They make a good alien.
Oh, yeah,
There's
absolutely.
also, though, a like pretty bogus paper that's been debunked, but they had a theory that octopuses did come from outer space, and they came from a meteoroid with octopus eggs on them and then landed in Earth, and that like created the Cambrian. So,
Seeded the planet or something. Oh, okay. That
so
it
there
was the
is
cause
that
of the Cambrian
paper
explosion.
that I think is what caused sort of the alien outburst. But it's been debunked pretty heavily. It's not true. Yeah, so I think that's also partially to blame. And the RNA editing stuff is not helping on like the octopuses are
Oh
alien.
no,
No.
no. Especially given today's stuff
Oh
involving
yeah, that like
all of that.
aliens
Yeah,
supposedly exist. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if
It's getting.
aliens were to exist, the deep sea is the best place to look for them because we're not going down there. It's unexplored. We can't reach there. Like, if aliens were to exist and invaded our planet, they're down. Like,
Yeah, they just hang out down there.
I fully believe that they would be down there.
Yeah, I
It's a great
I I I agree. I agree. Um. Okay. So cuttlefish. I know it's kind of a quick
Now let's get into it.
detour,
Cuttlefish.
I suppose. But cuttlefish, I've been fascinated by cuttlefish for as long as I can remember. The different ways that they kind of like, I can't even describe it. The weird, like the waving that they do on their body, like
The
the weird hypnosis
hypnosis.
things, and yeah, they're fascinating, and they seem different enough from like other squids and octopus and things like that. That I don't know, they're pretty unique. Um, First thing though, before getting into some of the other details about them, the 3D glasses study.
The
It
3D
looked
glasses.
adorable for
So this
one.
is one of my favorite studies. And I think it's obvious. I mean, they put 3D glasses on a cuttlefish. I could not become a favorite cuttlefish study. Basically, they wanted to like test the vision of cuttlefish and see what type of vision they have. And it turns out that they have vision, very similar to us, which we kind of knew already because they have a retina, they have a lens, they have camera-like eyes. So they do have eyes similar to us. And so they also have eyes similar to us where we have stereo vision and they have stereo vision, which is where they compile different images and then bring them together. And so that's what the 3D glasses study was studying. And it's the first instance of stereo vision in invertebrates, which is also very cool because, again, they evolved this completely separately from us. So it's wild that they've ended up with the same things and we're not even closely related.
So I suppose this is like a kind of something I was going to mention in a minute, but it works. So I've heard like a lot of different things before about cephalopod vision and
Mhm,
how it relates to their camouflage,
mhm.
because a lot of them have just some of the most spectacular examples of camouflage. I mean, even changing texture and things, and people saying things like, "Well, they can't see color, or they
Mhm.
can't see these things, and yet they do this, and how do they do this?" And it's a big what if kind of question. Um, what's going on there?
So there's so much going on. And I think the thing that frustrates people, which I think it frustrates them about cephalopods in general, is that we don't totally know. And so what's happening is that cephalopods are colorblind, and that's because they only have one color pigment, and you need at least two color pigments to see color. There are some cephalopods that can see color, like the firefly squid, and then there is one octopus that can also see color. But they're like a deep sea octopus. And we think that they are seeing the ones that can see color, they're seeing it to detect bioluminescence. But the way that we think that they're able to camouflage without seeing color is there's two different hypotheses. So one, they have proteins in their skin that are also found in our eyes called opsin. So in a sense, they can kind of see with their skin. So the proteins, opsin, are detecting not colors, but like brightness of things. And so then they're directly attached to their chromatophores. And now that I'm bringing up chromatophores, I feel like we need to talk about their camouflage in general.
Yeah.
So in order to camouflage, they have a couple different types of cells. So they have the main one is chromatophores, which is the most widespread, and they're like little balls of ink sac that they can expand and constrict, either to show the color or to show no color. And those are all connected by like really intricate muscle systems. And then on top of that, you have iridophores. And iridophores are little cells that are responsible for like your blues and greens and purples, like all the little shimmery colors. And these are like the second most widespread. And then on top of that, you have photophores, and photophores actually create light. In contrast to leucophores, which leucophores are only in octopus and cuttlefish, not in squid. Leucophores just reflect light. So photophores are actually creating light, and they can do that in a couple different ways, like with symbiotic bacteria, where leucophores reflect light. So they have this little system. They got the chromatophores, they got the iridophores, they got the leucophores, and all of these things on top of each other is what creates the amazing camouflage. And then on top of that, they can change texture, and they do that by stacking little skin cells on top of each other and having these little papillae. And little papillae are like in specific spots, and that they always have. So like they'll have them on little eyes. You know, they can't just like spurt them up everywhere, but they are kind of all over the place. And all of that is connected with really intricate nerves in their arms, and it takes a whole lot of muscle power to do it. And then yeah, so going back, they got the opsins on their chromatophores, which are detecting brightness. And then the other hypothesis is that their pupil shape helps them detect chromatic aberration. So, chromatic aberration is essentially if you see like a prism and then like the light, like you bend the prism and then the light gets like blurry, and that's when you see the color. They're using that to detect color, or that is the hypothesis, and that their pupil shape, whether it's the dumbbell pupil, the W, is taking advantage of chromatic aberration to see the blurry color. But that is again only a hypothesis. So it could be a combination of chromatic aberration and the opsin proteins, but it also could be something else that we just don't know. Like it's very hard to study this system, and there just needs to be more research on it. We just don't fully understand it.
It's fascinating. It's frustrating. It's the reason the whole thing is beautiful, and I love that
Mhm.
because I like when there's still not knows. You know what I
I
mean?
do
Like when there's still things where
too.
like, well, we don't really exactly know how it works. It happens. We know it happens. Just not entirely sure how. Like that's cool.
Yeah. And that's why I try to
Yeah.
like tell, especially on TikTok, I'm like, guys, there, if you are curious in this, and this is like, oh man, I want to figure this out, go figure it out. We need you. Go become a teuthologist. Go become a biologist. Like you could go so many routes in understanding, like studying cephalopods. There's so many different avenues that you could take, and you would be contributing to new information. Like if you want to make a discovery, make it in cephalopods, man. There's so much to discover.
Okay. All right. I think two more two more points,
Okay.
and then I'm running up on my clock. So, but it's just so hard not to like.
It's
Okay.
so hard
Uh,
not to just, yeah, I could talk forever.
are there like I know there's so many, and so it's kind of cruel to ask you to pick a couple,
Mhm.
but like in terms of interesting behaviors that different
Mm.
cephalopods exhibit, like what are some of the most like outlandish or interesting behaviors that you've seen?
There's this one squid that during mating, they will actually shove their arm into any squid's mantle that they see. So they will literally burst a hole open in the squid, male or female, drop their little sperm packet, and then go on their merry way. And that's just that I think that's absolutely hilarious. They don't check. They don't check if it's male or female. They don't really check anything. They just burst a hole through their mantle, drop their sperm packet, and go, which I think is so funny. And I also like bisexual icons. Truly no preference.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So that does it kill the
No, it
one
doesn't
that
kill
they
them. I mean, well, they're gonna die
no?
shortly after mating anyways. And
Right.
it is
Yeah.
it is Octopus that does this. And they also will like okay, so basically when you have like cephalopod reproduction parts, they have like a little end of their tip that is basically where they produce sperm. They basically patch them up into this little sperm packet that I kind of think of as like a little ketchup packet. Instead of ketchup, though, it's sperm. And that's how they like, so they'll like take their little arm that is actually their penis and they'll stick it in the female's mantle cavity and just like kind of drop it. But sometimes, especially with like Octopus, with how aggressive this is, they will just drop that arm and they'll just drop the arm tip like a little lizard. And we also see this in the paper nautilus. They will actually just hectocotylus. They will actually just rip their hectocotylus off and give it to the female because just kind of in spiders, it's the same thing. The female may get a little hungry, may take a little nibble. So they'll just drop it off. But in Octopus, they'll drop their little sperm tip, they'll punch it through the mantle, drop their little hectocotylus like a little lizard, and be on their merry way.
That's interesting. And see, these are the reasons that it's important not to personify too much.
Yes!
Get a little bit weird.
But I will personify them a little bit because I do think they are the bisexual icons of the ocean.
Yeah, and I've heard of spiders doing that too, where they'll like sometimes they'll just like kind of rip one of their arms off, and they're like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it
this.
depends on like how angry they are, how much they're annoyed by, how hungry they are, if they need a little snack. I think it's iconic personally. I would love to have the ability to just eat my mate.
It's interesting, that's for sure. Jeez. Huh.
So that's
all
one
right,
of my favorite cephalopod facts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also like the they're older than trees. I think that's a great one because they really have been around forever. They've had quite a history. And I think it takes people like they're like, oh my god, they were around before trees even. I'm like, yeah, before trees even became a thing.
Are there any this is an area I don't think I ever really see anything in terms of like conservation. I mean, there's like species declines like you wouldn't believe all over the place, and basically every phyla of life. Cephalopods, how are they doing? Are they
currently? They are doing so good. They are booming. My hypothesis on why that is their main competitor is fish. And currently we are overfishing the crap out of them. We are really over exploiting all the fish stock. And so we have a lot less fish in the ocean.
We have removed 90% of the large fish from the oceans, and 88% of the world's fish stocks are already fully exploited, overexploited, depleted, or in a state of collapse. That's something that we talked about on the episode with Alexandra Mickenturf. It was mostly about shark conservation, but of course that came up. So if you want more about that, you can look in those episode notes. There's a bunch of papers in there. Otherwise, I mean, look around. Look at life.
So I think why their populations are booming right now is because there's less fish. So they're kind of filling that niche and taking over where the fish have gone out. But in terms of like long term, I don't know how well they will do. It's a lot of speculation, mainly when we do like lab tests of cephalopods and how they fare to like hotter waters. They don't fare well. It really is detrimental to their reproduction and development. In the squid and cuttlefish, they have their little statolith, which is a tool that's used for balancing and orientation. And when you have too hot of water temperature, they don't develop properly. And so then you end up with a lot of squid and cuttlefish that can't properly orient themselves. And then on top of that, they can't, they don't, their reproduction is threatened. So whether or not like the eggs even get fertilized, and then on top of that, the egg casings in warmer waters won't fully protect the eggs. So you end up getting a lot of uh, babies that either aren't fully developed or just like won't hatch or die shortly after hatching. So you're getting like smaller octopuses and squid and cuttlefish. You're getting smaller, well underdeveloped ones. They don't survive long after hatching. Reproduction is threatened, and then on top of it, they have a threatening to their balance and orientation. So all things don't look good. But saying that, when we then look at, putting octopuses in different environments, and like doing like RNA editing things, they're acclimating, you know? So like, and they have survived 5 mass extinctions. So, we have these lab studies that says, oh, it doesn't look too well, but then we have all these other things that seem to say that they can acclimate, um, and that they seem to be doing okay. So it's a really, we don't know. My opinion is if waters get too hot, not going to go well. Even if they can acclimate with RNA editing to a certain extent, if it gets too hot, if their reproduction and development is threatened, then that's not going to fall well. It could just be that they see a dramatic drop in population. Maybe they don't die off completely. Maybe they, go deeper. Maybe, it's hard to say what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. Ocean's complicated in
The
particular.
ocean's so complicated.
Yeah, and cephalopods. I mean, especially the RNA stuff. That's a whole new can of worms to consider.
It is a whole new can of worms. And I wish we talked more about it, because I feel like so many people will get so much more interested in molecular biology when they learn about RNA editing.
So I suppose the just the final kind of thing would be, and you've kind of, I feel like in general, everything we've discussed has been a solid argument for why people should care about cephalopods. But if you had to, like a campaign pitch for why everyone should care about cephalopods, whether it's considering studying them or just learning about them or seeing them, I don't know, whatever it is, but why should people care?
I think it gives a fresh perspective of life and how life evolves and how life becomes. And it for me at least, that gives me like a whole new love of being alive, of like being like, wow, the world is really freaking crazy and we are only beginning to understand it. And we won't be able to fully understand anything if we kill it all off and if it all goes away and we don't do anything about climate change and all the oceans boil, and like we will never know. We will never know how stinking cool all of these animals are and the crazy adaptations that they have used to survive in such crazy conditions, and how completely different that is from us. I think a lot of people love talking about human biology and all these like, oh, they're just like us. But what about things that are not at all like us? Not at all. Not at all like us. Completely different and yet look so similar. Like I think that just it how can you not care? How can you not care about that? How can you not root for them? How can I don't know. I just think I just think they're so stinking cool. And I think we can learn so much about them and we can really come up with even like new innovations for humanity comes from cephalopods. AI technology, cephalopods. Soft robotic arms, cephalopods. They're even trying to engineer color changing skin, cephalopods. Even RNA editing, gene therapy for chronic health conditions, cephalopods. Like there are so many answers in cephalopods.
Well said. I think that would sway anyone's vote for sure. No,
So,
yeah, that's
see me on my next
solid. That's solid.
campaign.
Thank you so much. This has been, I would say, in 180 episodes and almost as many interviews, probably one of my favorite conversations just because this has been absolutely fascinating.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, this was great. So,
Thanks again, Meg. As was alluded several times throughout today's episode, Meg is so much more than an octopus biologist studying their remarkable RNA editing abilities. She's a science communicator primarily on TikTok as Invertebabe, Invertebabe, that's INVERTEBABE. And for some reason, where I typed that, it says Invertebean, which makes no sense. Meg is an artist, an incredibly talented one at that. I highly encourage you to give them a follow and check out their work. Meg has a super creative sticker club of cephalo-inspired designs like the cuttlefish and 3D glasses we mentioned, as well as merch. Like that merch, my personal favorite, has got to be the Save the Oceans, Save the World design. Very Heroes-esque, which is probably a niche reference nowadays. As always, thank you for listening. To learn more about Meg, the things we discussed today, or how to support the show, check out the episode notes for a virtual ecosystem of links and other cool things. If you have any questions, requests, or recommendations, feel free to reach out to me via email at hello@thewildlife.blog or on TikTok and Instagram at Devin the Nature Guy. Next time on The Wildlife, the Queen of the Wild. But until then, wander often, wonder always, and peace out, rainbow trout.